Ohio. Can you wink? Can you? I've learned some people can't wink. I, on the other hand, can't stop. How about you people online? Can you wink? I know you can. Well, for me, winking means a lot. So over the next hour, I want to encourage you all to wink with me. Wink when you hear things that you really like, or maybe find something that you can use. Because there are going to be points, we call them winks of wisdom. Not that I'm wise, but I am old. But if you have those winks of wisdom, every once in a while, just wink for me. And when you do, realize that that is something you can use. Now, my hope is that you wink at least once during this next hour. Honestly, I hope you wink so much you get an eye cramp. But I've learned to manage, or to know my expectations. Do you know what makes you unique? Do you know what sets you apart? On March 4th of 2011, I woke up and I couldn't see. I stumbled my way to the bathroom and I flipped on the light switch. Nothing seemed to happen. When I turned towards the mirror, I could see a sliver of light from the bottom of my eyes, but my eyelids wouldn't open. My face was swollen. My eyes don't go in the same direction. I was blind. My wife heard the commotion and she came downstairs. Brian, what happened? I don't know. I don't know. As soon as we were able to, we rushed to the ER. And in the ER, after hours and hours of tests and hours of waiting, the doctor came in. Mr. Wagner, it appears as though one of the this cavernous malformation, it's a malformed blood vessel. One of those has bled, and it's putting pressure on the nerves that control your vision. We're recommending you have brain surgery. Brain surgery? They told me never let someone operate on my brainstem. What's changed? The problems you have are only going to become worse and more frequent. Worse and more frequent. Worse and more frequent? Well, time out. So this whole worse and more frequent thing, I had been diagnosed with a cavernous malformation in my brainstem in 1992. And worse and more frequent was true because in November of 2020, that great year, I had another brain bleed from another cavernous malformation that had bled, and it bled putting pressure on nerves that control my tongue. Wow. What a great thing for a speaker to have. As you can imagine, that's a little nerve-wracking. But, so I have a little bit of a speech impediment. I have numbness down the entire right side of my face. I stumble over words. But everybody stumbles over words. I just have a doctor's note. Anyway, so as a 10-year-old boy, before all this in Northwest Ohio, you heard the story of me growing up on a tomato farm. I used to play football by myself because I was one of those kids that didn't want to farm. All my brothers and sisters would be on the farm, and they still are today. But I would be on the football field in the front yard. So I would take this hike from the virtual center. And I would be, hut one, hut two, hike. And I'd hike the ball to myself. And then I'd hand the ball off to myself. And if I wanted to switch it up, I would throw the ball to myself. Oddly enough, I usually scored. but not always. Well, there was this one time that I was out in the front yard playing football by myself, and my mom came running out. My mom was holding this piece of paper. She said, Brian, stop playing. Stop playing. I've got something for you. It's the registration for the Elmwood Royals football camp. You've always wanted to play football, and you've always wanted to be an Elmwood Royal. This is your chance. Mom was a little more excited than I was. But I was excited. I got to play football with my friends. That's all I ever wanted to do. Day 3 of that football camp came, and I was blindsided. I was rushed to the ER again, and there they determined that I had hydrocephalus. That's cephalus. I was 10. So they determined that I needed to have a shunt put in. It was a shunt that I still have even to this day. It drains fluid, excess cranial fluid from my brain to my abdomen. After that, they said that I wouldn't be able to play football anymore. So just like that, my dreams were dashed. Do you remember who you wanted to be when you grew up? Well, for me, it was a football player. How many of you would say HR manager? There may be some. But anyway, I'll never forget, shortly thereafter, we went to my grandma's house. And there at grandma's, you expect to walk into grandma's and get some sage advice, maybe get some cookies. So I walked in and she asked me how I was doing. I said, Grandma, I'm really upset because I'm not going to be able to play football anymore. And not only did she give me some sage advice and some cookies, but she also gave me a little pity. But she said, Brian, let me tell you 4 things. And these may be winks of wisdom. But that first thing is, she said, Brian, life is going to turn out differently than you plan. Now, that may be for all of you that didn't say HR manager. So life is going to turn out differently than you planned. Always be open to reimagining your life. She went on to say, find what makes you unique. And that's why I asked you that question early on. What makes you unique? What makes you different? And then finally, use that to make someone's life better. If you can do that, the world is yours. You'll have eternal happiness. Grandma was smart. Now, I was 10 years old. I had no idea what to do with this information at that time. But I knew there was something to that. So back to the ER. Worse and more frequent. Worse. So I was blind, and it was going to get worse. I was petrified. But they said there's one guy that we recommend you go and see. One specialist, one doctor. Are there times in your life where there's just one for you? There's just one person? Maybe it's a coach or a mentor, possibly a teacher, maybe a spouse. Maybe it's your employer. Maybe it was one of your employees that showed you something you hadn't seen before. Remember that name. Put it in your head. Now, we did have surgery in Phoenix, Arizona, and on April 1st, no fooling, I had brain surgery. There was all this buildup to it, and then just like that, it was over. Now, I did have a little curtain closer assistance from my brother. I mean, there's some things that nobody needs to see. But the next day, after having surgery, one 24-hour period after having surgery, I was discharged from the hospital with a little bottle of extra strength Tylenol. That's true. Well, I came home from Phoenix, and I wanted to get my life back to normal. There was everything I wanted to do. I just wanted to have a normal life. I wanted to have my sight back. Well, what I got back was vision. I should have been more specific with what I asked for. But I had encouragers. And one of those encouragers was my wife, Connie. She encouraged me to go for walks. Now, I had no idea she wanted me down such treacherous terrain. I mean, there's ledges on the left and ledges on the right. But then there's undulations. I have to say it slow because I can't say it well. It's a fun word to say. Undulations? Words like that are fun. Anyway, everything changed when I did two things. First, if I actually admitted, because I needed to admit that I was blind. If I admitted that I was blind and took her hand, that walk became much easier. But if I went down that sidewalk the other way, everything changed. My perspective changed. Those undulations changed. Much like you in your jobs as HR managers, whatever the case, the people you're managing or customers you're working with or partners you have, if you take their perspective, everything changes. There's always two sides to there's probably more than two sides to every story. So consider how you can do that yourself and have a different perspective. Now, I mentioned I had encouragers. One of my other encouragers was my daughter, Jess. I want to ask, before I'll just read the letter. So the letter is special to me, and I'd like to read it to you. She wrote me a letter that Father's Day. She was 13 years old at the time. She said, "Dear Dad, happy Dad's Day. I hope you have a great day because you definitely deserve it. All the cars and TV commercials always say, 'My dad's the best.' But they're all lying. You're the best ever. Sure, other people's dads are great. I mean, they're younger than you, they're sportier, and they're funner." I'm looking for the compliment here. Here we go. But you've got something they don't have. Bravery. Even after everything you've been through, you still get out of bed in the morning. You still joke around and play with us and cook on the grill, even though you only have half of one good eye. But you do more still. You teach me that even though you go through the toughest, most grueling things, that if you just believe that God is right there with you through everything, believe that everything turns out okay in the end, you're going to make it out alive. Not always unscathed, but alive. And give me that hope, that sense of belief. Well, I'd take that over a dad with two good eyes any day. Love, 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 Jess. Do you remember the last time you received a letter like that? I got a better question. Do you remember the last time you wrote a letter like that? Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take 3 minutes here in another few seconds. We're going to take 3 minutes and we're going to write a letter. We're going to write a letter to that one. Remember that one you looked at? One that you thought of that made that difference for you at one time in your life? That's what I want you to do. You can use this format or not, but the format that Jess gave me was, she told me who I was. She told me not to stop comparing myself to other people because other people's dads are great. But she also told me about my faith and what I meant to her. So, for the next 3 minutes, I would like for you to take out a pad, a paper, and a pencil and write your letter. Thank you.
Lights went out, he could no longer see. In an instant, Brian's life changed drastically. For 6 months, he lived in the dark, trying not to lose his spark. But sometimes blessings come unexpectedly. The light returned when he regained partial sight. His spark fanned into flame and lit the night. Brian came to a life-changing decision, because sometimes you must go blind to gain vision. So keep winking with Wagner. Identify your own blind spots. Winking with Wagner. Making the best of what we've got. Winking with Wagner means enduring the pain we all go through. Keep winking with Wagner, 'cause he's got his good eye on you. Says you've gotta laugh even when it's hard to smile. Show gratefulness though you may feel it's not worthwhile. If you always see half empty or always search for greener grass, Brian would tell you that he's grateful just to see the glass. So keep winking with Wagner. Identify your own blind spots. Winking with Wagner. Making the best of what we've got. Winking with Wagner means enduring the pain we all go through. Keep winking with Wagner, 'cause he's got his good eye on you. Keep winking with Wagner, 'cause he's got his good eye on you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. That's going to change that person's life. But you know, more than that, it's going to change your life. Everyone out there live, everyone here in this audience, I can't tell you how happy I am that you're able to do that. Because being an encourager is what this is all about. I need encouragers myself. I've needed plenty to get through what I've gone through. But those people that you're writing that letter to, and there's probably others in mind that you come to your mind. Think about your employees, how they need to hear that encouragement as well. We all need to hear encouragement. So tell me, who was your biggest encourager? We're gonna open up the mics and have some people come out with mics. I believe Jason and Megan are gonna have mics with you. So if there's anyone that wants to tell me who their biggest encourager was, I would appreciate it. And I can't see anything, so we all know that, Brian. Anyone?
We have some on Brian.
Who's that?
Hi, my name is Cindy. My biggest encourager, the letter I wrote was to my stepdad. He married my mom. I'm the oldest of 4. We never made it easy, but he never gave up on us. And without him, I really don't know where I would be today. So he's my biggest encourager.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Sana. So I wrote a letter to my husband. I'm from Poland. He grew up in Albuquerque. So for those of you who are married, you know the marriage is hard, but to have like an international marriage, it's even harder because of difference in cultures. So he helped me through, without kids. He helped me through my career, very supportive. And one of the things recently, he kind of joked about that half of my HR degree is his because he read from my papers when I got my MBA. So yeah, that's really special.
Thank you. One more? Is there one more? If
One
not,
more.
that's
I have
okay.
one more in the back here.
You got another one, Jason. The right side is getting overwhelmed here.
Hi. Hi, how are you? You're going to have everyone in here crying. I just want to say that. My biggest encourager is my mother, and the reason she's my biggest encourager is because I'm adopted, and I was adopted in the 70s, and there was no formal paperwork. My biological mother got pregnant as a teenager, and it was just one of those, hey, can you take Naida? I can't do it anymore. My mother already had 5 kids, and for her to acquire me was quite an undertaking. And I joke with her now. My mother told her she's in her 70s now. She's going to kill me saying that. But I kind of joke with her now, like, oh, you took me because I just mixed in with the rest of them. But now that I'm older and you understand the impact of what she did, she essentially saved my life. But not only that, she lived every day with the risk that my biological mother could just decide, hey, I want her back, give her back. And so she literally put her faith and her heart on the line every day for me. I'm legal now. It's paperwork now.
Awesome. Woohoo! That's great. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I truly appreciate that. So we can, Jason and Megan, you can sit, but here, I clicked the wrong. This has made me realize I have blind spots. So I have blind spots on the clicker as well. But those blind spots are really anything that causes you to not be able to see what you should be seeing. Now, when I drive, which doesn't happen anymore, I had to give up driving. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. No, it's not the hardest thing, but it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. But when I used to drive, I would have somebody in the passenger seat. They would see my blind spots. That's the agreement we had. So they would see what I didn't see. Who sees your blind spots? Who sees what you don't see? Now, I've had conversations with people today in regards to their blind spots and what blind spots all HR managers have. There are some very distinct blind spots. So resistance to change would be one of them. There's other blind spots like the inability to the lack of accepting the difference between appreciation and recognition. Possibly the acceptance of a culture. So there's cultural changes that need to happen within an organization. So those are blind spots as well. This is the greatest group of encouragers that I have, and this is my immediate family. You can see that myself is there, and I'm winking, and no one else is winking. Right? Well, this one year, it was 2 years after after I'd had surgery, and I got really, I hated having my picture taken because I didn't want this to last. I didn't want there to be a lasting impression of this. So I got upset, but what I did is instead of getting mad at myself, I said, family, would you all wink with me next year? That way I'm not the only one winking, much like we all winked here today. They said, sure, Dad. I think it was maybe something like, sure, Dad. But anyways, they all did it. They winked with me next year. Now, granted, some of them were better winkers than others. but they did it. They winked with me, and this whole picture started me to thinking about winking and how important it is to wink. But more than that, also it is important to have that self-awareness. And because that self-awareness really becomes a lever in whatever you're doing, whether it's your personal life or your professional life, that self-awareness becomes a lever for you to be able to use that to make someone else's life better. So that was one of the first steps, is being able to wink with my family. And then that self-awareness also leads you to your weakness becoming your uniqueness. That might be another wink. I can feel people winking at me now. But the final thing is that think about this in your work world, that employees that are included are employees that are engaged. So having engaged employees will retain those employees longer. But you've got to include them first. I'm a guy that doesn't look like everybody else. Granted, let's point out the elephant in the room. When you heard diversity and inclusion, you didn't think about this middle-aged white guy talking. But understanding that, I still have a lot to offer from a diversity and inclusion perspective, because there are many, many times that I don't get included because of my vision, of my speech impediment, of my brain bleed. People negate me. They say, oh, well, he's not interested in that. He doesn't want to do that. He probably can't see that. Don't do that. Don't exclude me without me knowing. If you want to include me, include me. Now, this is one of the first pictures that we took after my family photo, where someone else encouraged me to wink and be in the picture and wink with me. When they winked with me, I asked them to think, if this guy next to me knows what makes him unique, and it's not his eye, I wonder what makes me unique. So that's where this started. And from there, we've gone on to conferences all over the country where people have stood in front of a camera with me and winked. And when they wink, again, they think about that. But understanding that, for me, what makes me unique is not my eye. What makes me unique is my unique ability to share my story with other people, to have a lasting impact on their lives. So, like I told you, these pictures have gone viral. My mom even has seen them. So I went and took my mom a Blizzard for her birthday, or not her birthday, for Mother's Day. And I got there, and my sister Marlene was there. I said, Marlene, would you take a picture of me and Mom? She said, sure. Afterwards, I looked at the picture, and I said, Mom, what are you doing? She said, I'm winking. I thought that's what everyone was supposed to do. So even my mom, at the age of 91, still supports me. And by the way, she is going to be 92 next Tuesday. So wish my mom a happy birthday. Thank you. Now, there are other people that have winked. Even Jason Lawson has winked with me via Zoom, and you got to love that. So we started to talk about what makes him unique. We started to talk about all that, and so we had a great time in that conversation. And there have been other people. So if you want to become immortalized or have a good time, become on the board. The board for SHRM, it's a great place to be. I know that I'm a board member myself of another organization, but I think the board is really, and that servanthood is really where it's at. So if you're thinking about serving in that aspect, please consider to do so. Another person that winked with me was my friend Gina. Now, Gina winked as well, and she understood what made her unique. Her doing that got me to thinking. So, as we went through this process and we understood what makes them unique, and we understood really more about her background. So that's really important for us all to know, is you can't understand what makes somebody unique without really understanding who they are, without knowing more about them. So we sat on the phone and on the Zoom call and had that conversation. And then finally, another good friend now is Megan. And we call her Megan Holland. She's got a great wink, doesn't she? So it was so nice to have her on that call and to learn more about what she's doing in the work world and her personal life. There's lots of good things going on with Megan as well. So I remember all that from a conversation we had months and months ago. But now they're a part of this family that we have, that I have. There's relationships. So that's part of the way that I approach my relationships, is I consider everybody a friend. Now, there's many friends that are sitting out there that know me, and there's many friends sitting out there that don't know me yet. And I look forward to getting to know you. And I look forward to winking with you. That would be great if we could do that. So what we do is, I'm going to get this, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to a point where we understand a little bit more about this. And, oh yes, what I've done is I've written a book. So the book was based on my story of having brain surgery, but it really wasn't about me writing a book about all this stuff. I shouldn't say that. That didn't sound right. It wasn't a book about me writing a book just for the sake of writing a book. I wanted to write a book for my kids, and I wanted my kids to know who their dad was. And then if I ever have grandkids someday, I don't know if I'll get to see them, but I wanted them to know who their grandfather was. I mean, I just think that's really cool. But in the book, it helps people to go from a point of blindness to sight to vision. Blindness to sight to vision. Think of that as like awareness, and then to acceptance, and then finally to action. And there are books that are going to be, these books are going to be for sale out in the exhibit hall. My good friend Ryan Campbell is going to be helping me sell them, and hopefully you can take advantage of that when you're over there. I'm going to be around for the next few days, so hopefully we can help you out. Also, there's also this Wink workbook. So if you don't have the Wink workbook yet, you can go get it at radicalvision.com/wink if that's something you're interested in. But the Wink workbook really is where it's the next book that I have that's coming out, the Wink. And it helps people to understand what's important. So WINK stands for this acronym. What's important? For you, it may be writing a letter. You may want to write more than one of those letters. Or possibly you want to eat more healthy. So things like that. That's what's important to you. So if you write that down in the WINK workbook, you can understand and focus on that. If you write it down every day, it helps you even more. And then there's other things that get in the way sometimes of you writing that letter. Maybe work gets in the way, or possibly family commitments. There's other things that get in the way. But if you write down what gets in the way, then you'll be able to focus on that and understand that that's something that's there that you need to make sure you schedule around. Another thing that might get in the way of you eating healthy would be French fries. I mean, who doesn't love French fries? They get in the way sometimes of me eating healthy. And then the new way of thinking, a new way of looking at life is the end. And the end is a pivotal part of this, because having that different mindset, that growth mindset, will make all the difference in the world. And yes, the K is fancy. You can't have the WINK without the win and the K. But the K is fancy because it stands for kinesthetic. It's a fancy word, but it means taking action, doing something with your importance, with what is important to you, what your purpose is. Now, think about this from a more of a business perspective, or not even a business perspective, just a general perspective. What is the biggest issue you face? This is going to help you to understand what makes you unique. So what is the biggest issue you faced? Think about that. People online, tell me in the chat box, what is the biggest issue you faced? Next, how did you overcome or accept that? And accept that. For me, the biggest issue I faced was going blind. The way I overcame it and accepted it, I had brain surgery to hopefully overcome it. That didn't work. So I got to a point where I accepted it because I did get a little bit of my vision back, a little bit of my sight, but I understood that this is what I should be doing. It's standing in front of people, trying to help them with their vision, trying to help them with their blind spots is what I should be doing. And I love doing this. Hopefully, this continues on. So, the next question is, how can you use that? How can you leverage that for your advantage? Think of how you can use, or how I've been able to use this. So I work at the Ohio School for the Blind. That is something I never would have thought of doing before. Actually, that's something I never thought of doing after I was blind, because I didn't want to accept the fact that I was blind. But once I accepted it, once I became aware of it, then I realized how to use that as a lever. And now I get so much more out of being with those students than you can ever imagine. So think about that from your perspective. How can you leverage what you've gone through and how you've overcome that? We're at a point now where we have still a little bit of time left, but I want to have a little question and answer period before our final story. So once we have that final story, you're going to get to hear more about the School for the Blind and the work that I do there. But if you would, go out to that survey and let my mom know how I did. She would appreciate that. So while we're getting ready for a question and answer period, and the lights can come up and everything, but I want to tell you a little bit about those name patches, or the eye patches that are on your table. The eye patches that are on your table say eradicalvision.com, but then they also have a URL. And the URL is my website, which is brianwithoneeye.com. And I want to tell you how that's just wrong, isn't it? Well, I told you I was in IT sales. I've always gotten lots of nicknames. So no matter when it was, I'd be a 10-year-old boy, or any boy that was younger than 10 kids. I got a lot of nicknames there. So they called me Burns, they called me Bernie. The kids at school called me Wigglebutt. Yes. They called me Wags, Wiggy, anything you could think of. But then I went into sales, and one of the nicknames I got was Buy It Back Brian. Now, I don't think that's a good name to have in sales, but that's one that I got. Well, in IT sales, whenever you go out to calls, most calls, you have somebody there with you. And it's technical, that's a hard word for me to say. So it's a good thing I've got that note. It's a technical person. So I worked for IBM. And there would be this other person there, and we went into one account, and we walked up the guard shack, and I said, "We're here to see Bill." And the nice lady there with her full uniform on and everything, bowed her head down. She took out her Sharpie, and she went to make me out a name tag. And she said, "What's your name?" And I said, "My name's Brian." And she said, without looking her head up, she said, "How do you spell that?" And I said, "That's Brian, with one eye." Now, I didn't think it was that funny, but, smart guy over here was like, I'm like, what happened? What? I kind of forgot about my disability, kind of. And he's like, one eye? That's hilarious. So, that's who I am. That's what I've become identified with. Now, this speech impediment is probably going to make another thing out of this, because I sometimes talk like I have marbles in my mouth. Sometimes my tongue goes faster than my brain does. But when I came to that realization, that I accepted who I was, that changed everything. So I want to ask you, what do you need to accept What role have you stepped into? What position have you taken over? Think about what's changed in your life and how you need to change with it. You need to evolve with it. If you do and accept that, everything is going to change for you. And I look forward to you doing that. So, having said that, we're going to bring the lights up. We're going to have some question and answer period. And any questions you might have for me, I'd love to answer them. And there goes Jason and Megan. Are there any questions I can answer? I have books that I'll give to the person that asked them. I promise.
Hi, thank you so much. Very inspiring. My question is, what do you think caused you, like when you were going through the surgery, like you came out of it and it sounded like you were very positive. What in your history or your upbringing do you think attributed to that?
That's a good question. I start off with I knew I had kids. I mean, my kids at that point were, like I said, Jess was 13, and I had a younger one that was 11, and my oldest was 15. I knew I needed to be there for them. I knew I wanted to provide for them. I never had the mental issues, the anxiety, the fear. I had some, but not like I had in November of 2020, where I had another brain bleed, and they said there was nothing that they could do. They said at that point that, they would do more damage than the cavernous malformation would do. But to answer your question about 2011, when all this happened, I don't know. Part of it is the positivity in me. I want to be a positive person. So I think that's it.
We have one down here. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, but I wanted to ask, what do you do at the school where you work? Are you a teacher there? And what made you decide to actually go into that after your surgery?
Well, that's part of the final story.
Brian, we're actually over here.
And part of the final story is, yes, I am an after-school program coordinator at the school for the blind. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Was there something?
We have one over here. Talking about your teaching career now, what is it that you share with your students that inspires them or helps them?
And that's funny because the first time that I was with the students, I hadn't even started at the school yet. I just told them my story, and the principal, after I told my story, it was like a 10-minute story of what I'd gone through. The principal came over and said, "You have no idea what you've just done." And I'm like, "What did I do?" And she said, "Well, this girl had never thought of she could ever have a normal life. She would never be able to drive, never have kids. You showed her somebody that's at the point when I had surgery, I was 43. I have 3 amazing kids. They're just absolutely amazing. And I have a beautiful wife. At that point, I was still able to drive. So, and I have a shunt, and she had a shunt. So for that girl to see the success that I'd had from her perspective, it's just more of being a person, being a human. I mean, the human side of human resources is it's absolutely critical to understand that they are humans. Did I answer? Thanks. If there are no other questions, we will finish up. Thank you.
Brian.
So I told you I worked at the Ohio School for the Blind. At the Ohio School for the Blind, there's many, many clubs. There's the CrossFit club, there's a yoga club, there's a cooking club. But my favorite club of all, it's the knitting club. Well, when I heard knitting club, my grandma's words came back to me. Remember what grandma said? Those 4 critical points? Brian, life is going to turn out different than you plan. Always be open to reimagine your life. Find what makes you unique, and then do something with that to make someone's life better. Like I said, at the School for the Blind, we have many clubs. Really, I'm the after-school program coordinator. That's my job. And I want to make sure that I have the students lined up. I have teachers lined up. I have the rooms and everything and any supplies that are associated with that. But I just make sure that things go off without a hitch. And that's my job. It's the greatest job I've ever had because I get to meet with students that are visually impaired. And every one of them has changed my life for the better, and I'll never forget them. But this club, this knitting club that I went to, the first night of knitting club, we had to go get supplies. And as you can imagine, if you're at Joann Fabrics and you see a caravan pull up with 10 students from the School for the Blind, you're like, oh my gosh. And these 10 students are being led by me. Talk about the blind leading the blind. Well, anyways, we arrived in the front right part of the store. And of course, when we get there, the knitting supplies are in the back left corner of the store. So of course, we had to weave our way to the knitting supplies. In the knitting club, we had to weave our way. Yeah, I had to fish for that one. Woo! Anyway, we get there, we get the knitting supplies, and I was amazed. The kids, well, the students and the leaders, they wanted to make sure we had as thick a yarn possible, but the students wanted to make sure that we had a certain color of yarn. Why did it matter? So I pulled D off to the side. I said, D, what's with this color of yarn? She said, well, I want to knit a scarf for my mom. And my mom's favorite color is blue. Everyone had a similar mission. Well, we ended up getting our supplies and everything just fine. We went to the checkout line. Now, you didn't want to be behind us in the checkout line either. But once we got through, everything was fine. But we had another week then before our next night of knitting club. In the knitting club at the School for the Blind, it was in the old original lobby for the school. And you walk in, and there's all these leather furniture, there's wood-covered walls. It's a beautiful place. But you walk in, and at least I walked in, and the kids were already, laying on chairs and couches and whatever, and they were all knitting. And I walked up to the club leader, and I said, is there anything you want me to do? She said, yeah. Can you go help Adam? I said, sure. I have no idea what I'm doing. She said, it's okay. You'll figure it out. Okay. So I walk back, and Adam's in the back of the room. And I finally gets to him, and I said, Adam, how you doing? So Adam and I, we called each other friend for quite a while, just because it was easier. He would call me friend, I would call him friend. I said, friend, how you doing? He said, I'm doing all right, but I'm having a hard time with this. So he had what's called a modified loom. Are there any knitters in here? Of course there is. There's always knitters in here. Well, he had this modified loom, and it had 4 pegs, and on each of these 4 pegs was a groove. Now, he had already cast it on. Cast it on is a knitting term. Ask a knitter here, they'll tell you about it. Anyway, he had already cast it on, and then he had this string, this yarn laying across the top. Well, what he had to do is he had to take this hook in one hand and hook it under there, put it in the groove, and lift one string over top of the other and over the peg. That is how you make a loop, or what we've become called a loopy. Well, not loopy as in Loopy Sanchez, or loopy as in, feeling a little loopy. Not that. But a loop. Thanks, somebody got that. But a loopy as in a loop. Anyway, so Adam tried to explain to me what he was trying to do, and I asked the leader to come over and help us a little bit, so she gave us some good ideas. So then I finally I knew what he needed to do. So, and I just wanted to do it for him. I mean, I was getting frustrated. But after what seemed like a half an hour, he finally did it. He got the right yarn over top of the right peg and over the top of the other yarn, and he made it. He did it. He made a loop. He made a loopy. And I said, friend, you did it. You made a loopy. I did it. I made a loopy. I made a loopy. Loopy. Just then, in the back left, he made a loopy. 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 Then over here, loopy. 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 And before you know it, the entire crowd was shouting, loopy. 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 It was awesome. Not only had Adam knitted a feeling of success for himself, but he knitted a feeling of success for that entire club. You can imagine his mother's surprise that Mother's Day when he gave her his present. It was a scarf, and it was blue. I have to get this back to Adam's mom. So, let's knit this whole story together. Take those different loops, those little instances, and those little stories that you've heard. The stories of how I went blind, the story of my football camp career, my football career, the story of my dad, or my mom, and all the different people that have stood and winked with me. And then knit those all together, and you come up with a beautiful, beautiful scarf. And use different colors to come up with a different pattern. And when you have a different pattern, and you're making those stitches and those loopies even more succinct and even more close to each other, it becomes a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's why inclusion is a beautiful thing. That's why I do what I do, in order to have that level of inclusion not only in life, but in the workforce. I love doing this. I love doing what I do. I hope you love it as well. And as always, I appreciate you, but I also want to make sure that you continue to go forward and write that letter, because that is where it all begins. If you do that for me, I would really appreciate it. I'm Brian, with one eye. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great message. So that concludes day one for our speakers. I hope you guys had a great first day. Please make sure you visit the exhibit hall. They open at 5:15. Our exhibitors and sponsors will be super excited to see you. There's some food and drinks. Go mingle. This is our time to network. We've been craving it for almost 2 years. So go forth and have fun.